What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, the United States and Israel are executing one of the most sophisticated military operations in modern history against Iran? And what if I told you that most of the world has no idea how deep this rabbit hole goes? Stay with me for the next 20 minutes because what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you see the current Middle East crisis. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into Operation Epic Fury, the code name that intelligence sources are using for the coordinated US-Israeli response to Iran's growing regional influence. But before we get into the nitty-gritty details, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because stories like this are developing by the hour and you don't want to miss a single update. Let me start with something that happened just minutes before I started recording this video. According to breaking reports from Reuters, Israeli defense officials confirmed what many suspected but few dared to say out loud. The recent strikes against Iranian proxy forces weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a carefully orchestrated campaign that has been months in the planning. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Wall Street Journal reported just hours ago that US military advisors have been working directly with Israeli defense forces to develop what they're calling precision degradation tactics. Now, that's military speak for something much more significant than random airstrikes. We're talking about a systematic approach to dismantling Iran's regional network piece by piece. Let me break this down for you, because the mainstream media isn't connecting these dots. Over the past 6 months, we've seen a pattern that, when you put it all together, reveals a much bigger picture. First, there were the mysterious explosions at Iranian nuclear facilities, then the targeted eliminations of key Revolutionary Guard commanders, next, the disruption of Iranian oil shipments, and most recently, the cyber attacks on Iran's power grid that Tehran is desperately trying to keep quiet. According to intelligence sources cited by CNN, each of these incidents wasn't a standalone operation. They were all part of what's being called Operation Epic Fury, a joint US-Israeli initiative designed to, and I quote, systematically degrade Iran's ability to project power across the region. Now, you might be wondering why now? Why are the US and Israel escalating things to this level? The answer lies in something that happened 3 weeks ago that barely made headlines. The New York Times reported, buried on page 7, that Iranian forces had moved advanced missile systems to within striking distance of both Israeli cities and US military bases in the region. But more than that, according to satellite intelligence analyzed by the Institute for Strategic Studies, Iran was preparing to cross what military strategists call the point of no return. Let me explain what that means. Military analysts, according to a report published by Jane's Defense Weekly, believe that Iran was within 60 days of having the capability to simultaneously strike multiple targets across the region with precision-guided missiles. We're not talking about the crude rockets we've seen before. These are sophisticated weapon systems that could fundamentally change the balance of power in the Middle East. So how exactly are the US and Israel responding? This is where Operation Epic Fury gets really sophisticated. According to sources within the Pentagon cited by Defense News, the operation has 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 involved intelligence gathering and cyber warfare. Phase 2, which we're apparently in right now, focuses on targeted strikes against key infrastructure and personnel. Phase 3, which sources say is being held in reserve, would involve direct military confrontation. But here's what makes this different from previous military operations. According to the Financial Times, this isn't just about military targets. The US and Israel are also targeting Iran's economic infrastructure in ways that are designed to look like accidents or technical failures. Remember those power outages in Tehran last month, or the mechanical failure that shut down Iran's largest port for 3 days? Intelligence sources suggest these weren't coincidences. The economic warfare aspect of this is particularly fascinating. According to a detailed analysis published by Bloomberg, the US has been using what they call financial precision strikes against Iranian entities. These aren't broad sanctions that we've seen before. These are laser-targeted actions designed to disrupt specific operations while maintaining plausible deniability. For example, just last week, Reuters reported that 3 Iranian shipping companies suddenly found their insurance policies canceled due to routine risk assessments. But when you dig deeper, these weren't routine at all. These companies were specifically involved in transporting military equipment to Iranian proxy forces in Syria and Lebanon. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Now, let's talk about Israel's role in all of this because their part in Operation Epic Fury is probably the most controversial. According to sources cited in the Times of Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces have been given what they call expanded operational parameters for dealing with Iranian threats. In plain English, that means they've been given permission to act more aggressively than they have in decades. This expanded authority has manifested in several ways. First, according to military sources quoted in Haaretz, Israeli forces are now operating much deeper inside Syrian territory than they have since the 1970s. They're not just conducting airstrikes anymore, they're establishing what military analysts call persistent presence in areas where Iranian forces operate. Second, and this is really significant, the Jerusalem Post reported that Israel has been sharing intelligence with US forces at an unprecedented level. We're talking about real time targeting information, communication intercepts, and even human intelligence assets on the ground inside Iran itself. But perhaps most importantly, according to a classified briefing leaked to the Washington Post, Israel has been given assurances that the United States will provide direct military support if Iran retaliates in a way that threatens Israeli population centers. That's a level of military commitment that goes far beyond the traditional US-Israeli security relationship. Now, you might be thinking this all sounds very aggressive, but what's Iran's response been? And this is where the story gets even more complex. According to intelligence assessments cited by the Associated Press, Iran's leadership is caught in what strategists call the escalation trap. They want to respond forcefully to show strength, but they know that any significant retaliation could trigger the third phase of Operation Epic Fury, which could involve direct US military action. So instead, according to sources within Iranian government circles quoted by the BBC, Iran is trying to fight back through proxy forces while maintaining plausible deniability. Those recent attacks on US bases in Iraq, according to Pentagon sources cited by ABC News, those were Iranian Revolutionary Guard operations disguised as militia actions. The drone attacks against Israeli settlements, according to Israeli intelligence sources quoted in the Jerusalem Post, those were launched from Iranian facilities in Syria using Iranian equipment, but carried out by Syrian and Lebanese operatives to maintain deniability. But here's where Iran may have made a critical miscalculation. According to a strategic analysis published by the Council on Foreign Relations, these proxy attacks are actually giving the US and Israel justification for escalating Operation Epic Fury. Each proxy attack is being used as evidence that Iran is an ongoing threat that requires more aggressive response. Let me share something that really puts this in perspective. According to data compiled by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, there have been more than 200 incidents involving Iranian forces or proxies in the past 90 days. But according to the same data, only about 30 of these made international news. The other 170 incidents were either classified or deliberately kept quiet to avoid public pressure for broader military action. This brings us to something that I think is really important to understand about Operation Epic Fury. According to sources within the State Department cited by Politico, this operation is designed to avoid the mistakes of previous Middle East interventions. Instead of large-scale invasions or occupation, the strategy is what military planners call death by a thousand cuts. The idea, according to a strategy paper leaked to Foreign Policy magazine, is to systematically degrade Iran's capabilities while avoiding the kind of dramatic escalation that would force other world powers to choose sides. It's a strategy that allows the US and Israel to achieve their objectives while minimizing the risk of broader regional war. But there are some serious risks to this approach. According to analysis published by the International Crisis Group, this kind of prolonged low-level conflict can sometimes spiral out of control in unexpected ways. History is full of examples where limited operations designed to avoid major wars actually ended up triggering them. Moreover, according to sources within European intelligence agencies cited by The Guardian, other regional powers are starting to take notice. Russia has reportedly moved additional naval assets to the Mediterranean, while China has increased its diplomatic engagement with Iran. Both countries see the US-Israeli operation as a potential threat to their own regional interests. So what does this mean for the immediate future? According to multiple intelligence sources cited by USA Today, we're likely to see an escalation in the coming weeks. Iranian forces are reportedly preparing what they call a decisive response to recent attacks, while US and Israeli forces are positioning themselves for what military planners expect to be Iran's most significant retaliation yet. The wild card in all of this, according to regional analysts quoted in the Wall Street Journal, is what happens if Iran decides to openly acknowledge what's happening and call for international intervention. So far, Iran has been downplaying the attacks to avoid looking weak, but there are signs that this strategy might be changing. Just yesterday, according to Iran's state media, as reported by Al Jazeera, senior Iranian officials made their strongest statements yet about coordinated international aggression against their country. While they didn't explicitly name the US and Israel, intelligence sources suggest this represents a shift toward more open confrontation. What makes this particularly dangerous, according to conflict analysts at the Brookings Institution, is that once countries start openly acknowledging military actions, it becomes much harder to maintain the kind of controlled escalation that Operation Epic Fury depends on. At that point, domestic political pressures in all countries involved can force leaders to take more dramatic action than they might otherwise prefer. Let me give you a specific example of how this could play out. According to sources cited by NBC News, Iranian leadership is under significant pressure from hardliners within their own government to respond more aggressively to recent attacks. These hardliners, according to regional intelligence sources, are arguing that Iran's measured response so far is being interpreted as weakness by their enemies and allies alike. At the same time, according to sources within Israeli government circles quoted by Channel 12 News, there's pressure within Israel to expand operations even further. Some Israeli officials reportedly believe that this is the best opportunity they'll have to significantly degrade Iranian capabilities, and they're concerned that waiting too long could allow Iran to develop better defenses. Meanwhile, according to sources within the Biden administration cited by CNN, there are growing concerns about the political implications of Operation Epic Fury. With elections approaching, some officials worry that any significant escalation could become a major political issue, especially if American casualties result from Iranian retaliation. But perhaps most significantly, according to intelligence assessments cited by the New York Times, all sides are operating under significant time pressure. US intelligence agencies believe Iran is continuing to advance its missile and nuclear programs despite ongoing attacks. Israeli intelligence suggests that Iran's proxy forces are becoming more sophisticated and better coordinated. And Iranian intelligence appears to believe that the US and Israel are preparing for even more aggressive action. This creates what military strategists call a use it or lose it dynamic, where each side feels pressure to act decisively before the other side gains too much advantage. According to historical analysis published by the RAND Corporation, this kind of dynamic has been a factor in several major conflicts throughout history. So, what should we be watching for in the coming days and weeks? According to multiple intelligence sources, there are several key indicators that could signal a major escalation. First, any Iranian attacks against Israeli civilian targets would likely trigger the third phase of Operation Epic Fury. Second, any Iranian interference with international shipping in the Persian Gulf could bring additional international forces into the conflict. Third, any Iranian withdrawal from international nuclear agreements could provide justification for more aggressive military action. On the flip side, according to diplomatic sources cited by Reuters, there are also several potential off-ramps that could de-escalate the situation. These include Iranian agreement to new restrictions on their missile programs, withdrawal of Iranian forces from Syria and Lebanon, or agreement to new international monitoring of Iranian nuclear facilities. But according to regional experts quoted by Foreign Affairs magazine, the window for diplomatic solutions may be closing rapidly. Each new incident makes it harder for leaders on all sides to back down without appearing weak to their domestic audiences. Let me close with this. What we're witnessing with Operation Epic Fury isn't just another Middle East crisis. According to strategic analysts at multiple think tanks, This represents a fundamental shift in how military power is being projected in the 21st century. We're seeing the integration of cyber warfare, economic pressure, targeted strikes, and information operations in ways that we've never seen before. The success or failure of this approach could influence how conflicts are fought for decades to come. If the US and Israel succeed in significantly degrading Iranian capabilities without triggering broader war, it could become a model for future operations. If it spirals out of control, it could serve as a warning about the dangers of this kind of graduated escalation. What's your take on all of this? Do you think Operation Epic Fury represents a smart, measured response to Iranian aggression, or do you see it as a dangerous escalation that could trigger broader conflict? Let me know in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because this story is developing rapidly and I'll be bringing you updates as soon as new information becomes available. Also, if you found this analysis helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with anyone who wants to understand what's really happening in the Middle East right now. The mainstream media isn't connecting these dots, so it's up to independent creators like us to get the full story out there. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop asking questions. Thanks for watching.